Quit using your in-camera flash. Just stop it. It's shitty pictures. You get fucking red eye and all kinds of problems. Stop it with the built-in flash. And don't use it on your cell phone at all either while you're at it. Well, this was kind of unexpected. I was approached by ESDDI, which is a company that makes lights and flashes and speed lights, and they asked me to do a review of the ESDDI Speedlight. And I figured this would be a good opportunity to do another beginner photography video for those of you who are new to the space. You know, there's a couple videos I want to do on this regard. Since I'm locked in the house because it's fucking raining all week, I decided to spend some time reviewing this product. And it brought me back to my roots. Now, when you first start out with photography, you got your camera, right? You spent a shit ton of money on this fucking thing. So you are ready, when you go out to buy a flash, to spend a shit ton of money on a flash. Now, full disclosure, they sent me this free of charge, but I am giving you my honest opinion on where this product fits in the niche of starting out with photography, or even if you're well established, you can never have too many speedlights, especially if they can be triggered remotely. Because one of the key steps further along in your photography is going to be to get the flash off the camera and into more creative spots and light your scene more creatively. If you're working weddings, you're going to put one of these on a stand on the other side of the room, bounce it off the ceiling. We'll get into all of the advanced stuff, but today we're going to cover beginner flash while reviewing this Speedlight. The link for this Speedlight will be in the description. You can purchase it, and there's an affiliate link, so that does help this channel out. And I want to thank ESDDI for having faith in a small YouTuber like myself to provide a video review of this flash. Now, you know, first of all, I'm going to talk a little bit about what they sent me, but I'm also going to be telling you about proper flash photography just starting out, and why I believe this is a good Speedlight for that. Because, you know, when I first started out, I spent a shit ton of money on flashes. I spent over $600 just on flashes. That's another lens. That's another prime lens that I could have used effectively to get roughly the same quality of light with a little more ease of use. So we're going to go through a little bit, but first they sent this to me. It comes in this awesome case, you know, for a $33 flash. It's for it to come with something like this says that they care, that they're putting a little bit of effort so that you will enjoy their product. The reviews are decent on Amazon for it. And I've been playing with it a little bit, and it is a flash in its basic form. It is manual. There's no TTL. For those of you who are new, TTL, what that does is it sends out a pre-flash so that your camera's meter can adjust your settings accordingly in the flash for whatever your scene is. This is a manual flash, which means you gotta do that shit. That means you gotta maybe snap a picture, do a test flash, you know, get an image. It takes a little bit longer to set this up to work properly. And if your scene is constantly changing, a manual flash isn't the best choice. But if you're just starting out and you're still learning the exposure triangle and you're trying to figure out, this is a fourth element in the, it turns your exposure triangle into a rectangle, because you have to really think about the settings of your manual flash. So far, some of the things that I've noticed about this, it doesn't have high-speed sync, but its sync speed is fairly decent, at least on Micro Four Thirds. I haven't tested it on a full-frame camera, but on my Micro Four Thirds, I can go up to 1/400th of a second without any black bars of happiness, because what's happening is sometimes the flash doesn't stay lit long enough for the shutter, and you get these black bars in your picture if your sync speed isn't on point. And in high-speed sync, it flashes a bunch of times to make up that, you know, essentially paint that scene. This can go up to 1/400th of a second before you exceed the sync speed on a Micro Four Thirds, it seems. You can get away with 1/500th of a second shutter speed. You know, so you're not going to freeze action. You're not going to do high-speed sync. You know, so if you're shooting fast subjects, this isn't the flash for you. But if you're doing portraits, or you're doing any situation on still subjects where you need to control the light, $33. And you could buy like 3 of them and 3-point light something in a studio or in a room or whatever, or in a situation, or just have it as a backup hair light or a flash once you get something that this will work with TTL systems, as far as it'll skip the TTL flash and jump right on your normal flash. But this is for when your light sucks, right? You're in somebody's living room, they're wanting you to do portraits in their living room. You could bring studio expensive ass $1,000 fucking lights, or you can bring one of these. Now, the first thing you're going to probably do as a beginner is put it on your camera and point it right at your subject. That is not what this is for. The top articulates and turns. So this first picture that I'm showing you was taken with this pointed right at me. And it looks like a prison photo. It is straight up not what you should do. In a pinch, if you're out in the sun and there's other light sources in your frame, then yes, you can direct flash to fill in some gaps, or if you're looking for a more high contrasty thing. But it's going to scream that you used a flash. And you can reach pretty far with this. I was blowing myself out at some pretty low settings testing this out, and by that I mean overexposing for the flash. So you don't really want to point it unless there's something between the flash, like a diffuser. If you're just starting out, you can get a frosty shower curtain at Walmart for like probably 11 bucks. Throw it on the stand in front of your direct flash, and you have soft light, albeit it'll bounce around a lot. Now, what these are good for is to aim them up. When you aim them up, you put this little bounce card, and that'll put a little reflection in your subject's eyes. You know, catch lights are important for portraiture. But if you can see, I've got a white ceiling. That is perfect. That becomes a huge softbox and gives you soft light. The difference between hard light and soft light, your shadows become, like right now I'm softly lit. I am bouncing my studio light off the ceiling. I have another light on this side bouncing off the wall to give me a little bit of fill. It's a less powerful light over here, brighter key light over here. I do not have a hair light. A third light behind me can also put a rim around me and give me separate me more from the background, which we're not really doing for the purposes of this video. And you can even add 4 or 5 more lights to light your background differently and give it more interest and so on and so forth. This is an art form in and of itself. Lighting is a full thing to learn, but you gotta start somewhere. You can't always be, if you stick with just natural light in your photography, you're taking away opportunities to get great images because you just don't have the proper lighting for it. Maybe your client called you to fucking go there at 2 o'clock in the afternoon when there's a clear sky and just nothing but sun, and now you're forced, while you may want a certain shot or a certain background, you can't use it because the sun's not in the right spot. The shadows are very harsh. And you can use some modifiers to diffuse. You can put something in between the sun and, you know, a reflector or a diffuser and do all of that. But a lot of times when you're starting out, you don't have an assistant or even a stand to hold that shit. So you've got to work with what's out there. So you've got to keep in mind what your capabilities are. So this flash is great for a beginner. It's going to teach you your exposure. You're going to use your shutter speed to control how much ambient light you get into. How much ambient light. You're still going to use aperture to control your depth of field, how blurry your background is, and how much light comes into the sensor. Both of these are going to affect where you set your manual setting on the flash, which we'll get into in a minute. So I'll run through how you set this up with your camera. This will work with just about any normal camera that has a hot shoe on it because it does not have TTL. It just relies solely on the sync signal, and that's it. So when you bounce it off of different spots, you essentially create an off-camera light. If I bounce this off the ceiling, I'm going to get a big spot of light on the fucking ceiling, which is going to bounce and light me from the top, much like you see here. You see this soft roll-off on me right now? That is because I'm bouncing the light off the ceiling. Now, I'm a little blown out now, but you're getting the idea of what's going on here. When I direct light, first of all, I'm going to blow myself out because it's much more powerful. It's the same with this flash. If you shoot it directly at somebody, you risk blowing out your image, especially if they're very close to you. I'm too close to this light to do anything about that at this point. My ISO is already pretty low. So this is what you're going to get. You're going to get this harsh line. Your nose is going to shadow. You're going to have harsh shadows. We still don't have super harsh shadows because I am lighting the left side of my face. But this is to give you an idea of what the direct lighting. If you look at the shadow coming off of my hand, it's very well defined. And that's what happens to you when you take, or your subject when you're taking the picture. But go back to bouncing it off the ceiling, and you can see the shadow that my hand casts is much softer. It's the same thing for your facial features. So if you want a nice portrait, bounce flash is the way to go when you're in a run and gun situation, or even in a studio where you have time to set up your manual lights. You can get the same lighting that your expensive flashes get with a bit more setup time and a bit more effort. And that's pretty much what you should do with a beginner flash setup, is get one of these cheap flashes and learn what situations, and after a while it'll become like muscle memory and you'll be able to know exactly what settings you're supposed to be at. So let me go through this real quick on the settings. But here's an image of bounce flash that I just did right in this little room. It's not spectacular, it's just to prove the point. And this was shot at a 400th of a second, which basically means that the only light that is lighting me was coming from this flash. No ambient light from the room. Even though I had lights on, you couldn't see them because my shutter speed was so fast. And 400th of a second, you might be able to compete with the sun outside with a direct flash if you needed it in a pinch. And you would want to take it off the camera, in my opinion, for that. And there's a couple ways of doing that. But that's advanced. That's advanced stuff. If you only have one flash, your most likely scenario that you're going to use it is just like this. Throw it on your camera and you have a bounce flash. So let's get started here. So interesting to note on the GH5, when you first start out and you put your flash on, you're going to notice that your display changes because this is a mirrorless system. So this is what your picture will, its estimation of what your picture will look like based on the fact that you're using flash. However, since this is not a TTL flash, this is not really giving you the exact picture. This is more so you can focus, get your composition good, get everything the way you want it, but this isn't how the image is going to come out. So, you know, just to let you know, I have it set at 400th of a second. So if I take the flash off, this is what you're going to be seeing in the camera. You're going to be seeing black, or very little. You might be able to make out, I can make out a little bit of the closet there. But that's what it roughly is representing. When I turn the flash on, it gives me an approximation of what the scene looks like. We're at 2.8 aperture and 400th of a second for time. So that's basically, you know, the gist of it. Once you get your settings, and I usually, with a flash, I will lock this somewhere above 250th of a second. If I'm trying to capture more action, I would go up to 400 because it will allow for faster movement. And in a lot of situations, that 400th of a second is kind of going to give you a sharper image if anything is moving, you know, quick or moving fast. Somebody's running, there's people dancing, that kind of stuff. That's a situation you want to try and get that up there a little bit more. Even if you have to bump your ISO, which is at 200 right now, which is below the base ISO of this camera, you know, you still, you know, if you want to bump your ISO so you don't have to flash as hard, that's what you can do. So you can play with your exposure triangle, keeping in mind you have the flash upstairs to control your light. So when we get into the ESDDI flash here, I find it is generally a very good budget flash. It's a very good budget flash. You know, because for $33, you're not expecting the world. You're not expecting all the auto shit. There are cheap TTL lenses and they're horrible. They have horrible recycle times. This thing I was able to fire 5, 6, 7 frames depending on what power I have it set at and still have it pulse the flash without having to regenerate. So I haven't had a lot of issues with that. But let me just do it real quick and see how it goes. So if I put it on burst mode and I just press the button, you know, it flashed 4, 5, 6 times in a row. Each one's going to be a little dimmer than the first one, so you got to keep that in mind. But that's a way you can bracket your flash in a manual setting. Like, say you aren't quite sure what your flash setting could be, so you can set it fairly high, like at 1/4 of a second like it is now, and then just fire off more than 1 frame. Somewhere in there, you're essentially bracketing your flash. Now, you're going to burn through your battery a lot quicker that way, so you got to keep that in mind. I use rechargeable AA, so I always have plenty of batteries, so that's not an issue. And I always carry those when I'm using flash solutions. But basically, that's a like guerrilla way of bracketing your flash without changing any settings when you don't have when you're using a manual flash like this. If you look at the front of the flash, you know, this right here is a sensor that will detect other flashes and fire at the same time. So you can use it without any adapters of any kind if you have another flash to trigger it with. So you could get 2 of these, put one on your camera, bounce it off the room or something, and then position this one as a second light, maybe a fill light on a lower power or a hair light behind the subject, depending on the look you're going for. For $66, you have a multi-lighting setup, which is starting out. I can tell you, you're going to be squeezing the budget because you already dropped your wad on the fucking camera. You don't want to have to spend it all on an accessory like a flash. There's plenty of lighting solutions that you can use. Eventually, you do want to get an expensive TTL flash for certain situations. You know, like a run and gun situation in a wedding, I would want some kind of TTL to cover But you could have this as a secondary flash at one of those events, and it would catch the flash from your TTL flash. So multi-mode is basically this mode here. Multi-mode, you can create a series of quick flashes just by holding this button down. Obviously you can't do it at that. So basically with the multi-mode, this is a way of pulsing your flash to get multiple exposures essentially. So if you've got your shutter speed where none of the ambient light's getting in and you wanted to pulse this flash at a certain frequency, all you do is just press and hold this button and it does 10 pulses at 90 Hertz at 128th power, and obviously the higher the power you go, the less it can do that. So it can be effective for an artistic person. I don't think I would use multi-mode. So the next mode is S1. This is where it detects your other flashes, but it only it fires on the first flash it detects. But it also has a mode where it'll work with a TTL, which is what this S2 is, which will ignore the TTL part of the metering flash and only fire on the exposure flash. So those are your modes. This is very basic, easy. There's not a lot of complication to this. You can basically just set your exposure how you want it and fire off an image. And just real quick, just to show you, I had it at 1,000th of a second. This is what I'm talking about for sync speed. So you want to keep it down, your shutter. With this particular flash, your shutter needs to be less than 400th of a second. So if we look now, perfectly exposed, even at 400th of a second, which you wouldn't be able to shoot with just the ambient light at 400th of a second because it would look black. So if I turn the flash off, and reset my manual mode, that's what you would see if you were to fire off a picture. So if I fire off a picture, nothing, it's black. I mean, you can probably pull it up in post and get a little something out of it, but you know, you'd have to raise your ISO and get a noisy image at this light level. You'd have to lower your shutter speed and risk some motion blur. So that's basically what you have to keep in mind, why you would want a flash. So overall, what you would use this flash for, it's a great beginner flash. It's a great second or third or fourth or fifth light to throw somewhere, depending on how complex you're lighting a scene with. Another thing I would use something like this for, especially with that multi-mode, that'd probably be the situation where I would use it, is light painting. You take it off your camera, you set up your long exposure, leave the shutter open 30 seconds, then you run around and you pulse the flash around your scene wherever you want to capture some light. You only need to do it a few times and then it's exposed. Of course, the later in the exposure you go, the less transparent whatever you exposed will become, as the ambient will eventually overpower the flash if you did it early in the exposure. And there's a lot of techniques that you can do that are artistic with a flash and long exposures in general. So play around with it. You know, it doesn't cost you anything. Even once you have the rechargeable batteries, this doesn't cost you anything to learn and play around with. And I've used other budget flashes in the past, and I gotta say, they didn't provide the value that I got with this. And I'm not just saying that because they fucking sent me one. I know you think I'm shilling or some shit, but they didn't give me a case. The recycle times were atrocious on those other cheap things. I mean, I'm talking the ones I bought at like Walmart that were probably 20 bucks, 20, 30 bucks in that area for a flash. It looks the same, but it didn't perform the same as this one. This one gets the job done in a setting where you have time to set it up. That's it. It's a great starter budget flash. Or it's a great secondary flash to throw somewhere else in the room that you don't have to worry about putting a receiver on, because the only other way to get camera flash is to put a transmitter on your camera and a receiver on your flashes, and that can get very pricey depending on what system you use. It's nice to have an option where I can point the sensor at my master flash and then aim the light where I need it. And this is probably going to add a ton of quality to your images if you use it properly. So, and one last thing, if you do have that on-camera flash, that built-in flash, the one that's popped up, it drives me nuts when I see somebody call themselves a professional photographer and they're running around like a big wedding hall with that little itty-bitty dinky flash popped up, flashing the shit out of everything they see. That's not, first of all, at that distance, those little built-in flashes can't reach. This would reach, given the amount of power you could get with a direct flash, but it's still, you don't want that look. That looks like a, hey, I used a flash look, and it'll jump right out at anybody. The key to making flash look good is to bounce it and to not hit, you need to be able to look at the picture and not tell that there was a flash used. It needs to look natural, and you use that by bouncing it or by diffusion. But we'll talk about light modification in some other video further down the line, since this is just a beginner video. So overall, I say for what it is, a budget flash with the basic easy controls, this is a great beginner flash. And, that's all there is to it. So thank you to ESDDI for sending this to me. It is going in my arsenal of my flashes, and it will probably be a hair light in some of my shoots. And it also is kind of my main flash on the GH5, since my Nikon Speedlight, which is expensive, it was over almost $400 that I paid for it, doesn't work. It only works manually with this lens. So essentially my $300 flash that I throw on my Nikon does the exact same bullshit on this camera that this does. I can't use high-speed sync with it, even though it's capable of it. I can't use any of the bells and whistles of my expensive ass flash with my GH5. This one, 33 bucks, gets the job done. And comes with a case. So that's my review of the ESDDI flash. Thank you for sending that to me. If you're interested in that flash, the link is below. And let me know in the comments what you think about whether or not you should use a fucking flash in your photography and shit. So that's it for this video. Please like and subscribe for some more fucking videos. We're going to do some photo adventures. We're going to do some reviews of things. We're going to compare shit. A lot of what I do is experiments for myself, and I just share that with you. You always need to be out there learning, practicing, testing, trying new things, and you could stumble on something, like I did with the whole using the high ISO on this camera, and being able to get a usable video out of it. There's things like that you only learn when you take the time to play with your camera, try out every fucking setting, try out your picture profiles, change settings. You can always go back and put them back the way they were. Write them down ahead of time, or do a full reset on the camera. But play with things. Learn how they work. Learn how changing your settings affects your image. Run tests. Play with your camera, and you will get good at this. Watch tutorials. Watch workshops. Learn from professionals. Learn to edit. We're going to start doing some beginner editing here soon. The next beginner video I want to do is a video where I talk about how to make better images too. So there's that. But that's it for this fucking video. Like and subscribe. Check out ScottTheTruckDriver.com if you found this informative, or if I helped you with your photography needs. Head to ScottTheTruckDriver.com, leave a tip in the virtual tip jar, and I'll keep doing this, especially since I get 0 ad revenue on this channel. Yeah. Someday maybe I'll be a good photography channel. Just not yet. But I'm working on it. As long as I keep working on it. It's the same thing with becoming a photographer. Just keep working on it. If you don't have any business, go out and shoot. Just go out and shoot. Say, you know, if there's an event coming up, hey, would you like me to shoot that for you? Oh, people love free shit. That's a whole other rant. But you can use that to get your foot in a lot of doors if you do a good job. So practice, get out there, take some pictures, get you a flash. It's going to open up a wide world of coverage. When you start bouncing flash around venues and events and being able to outdo those phones, because those phones can't do that shit. You know, all the phone images in the world can't compete with a bounce flash off of one of these cameras. And the quality of light. Even if you have a shitty, cheap DSLR that you bought on eBay for $300, you put a flash on that, you bounce that flash off of your ceiling or off of your wall, you're straight up going to get a better image than somebody that doesn't have it that's in that lighting environment. Because they're going to have to bump up their ISO, they're going to be dependent on the practical lighting in the room, which doesn't always work out if you're in like a bar or a restaurant or any of these low light environments. And even in high light environments, you might have the right light. So, other things to consider when you're getting started, get a 5-in-1 reflector. That's definitely something that should be in your arsenal. You can do a lot of light modification with that, and it just comes in handy. So, that would be my other piece of advice. So that's it for this video, and have a nice motherfucking day. Yeah. And get you a flash. Don't use that on camera shit. That on camera shit is bullshit.